Thank you. I'm just going to talk briefly a little bit more about our work on assessing geoengineering that Piers introduced in his talk at the beginning. So one of the aims of IAGP was to situate the assessment of geoengineering proposals within wider societal values. And by this we mean we wanted to move beyond the types of assessments that had happened to date, which had tended to be conducted by academics and experts and tended to use quite a narrow, often technical focus set of criteria. So our intention was, with the grid structure that Piers showed you earlier, our intention was to engage with the public and also to engage with other stakeholders, some of whom are in the room today, to broaden out the perspectives in order to come up with a definitive list of criteria by which we should assess geoengineering proposals. So that's what we did. We came to London and we talked to a total of 29 participants from the public sector, from the private sector and from civil society. There's at least 5 faces in the room I've spotted so far that were there and took part on the day. A lot of post-it notes. And we had some brilliant feedback and some really insightful discussions. And it's at this point that I'll confess we were somewhat naive in our approach. This idea that we could somehow make assessment of geoengineering proposals more aware of kind of broader societal perspectives by just coming up with a definitive list of criteria didn't quite cut the mustard in the room. And we were being pushed back a lot on this, and I think to our credit, we were very responsive and we were able to take our original grid idea and move that aside and acknowledge that it wasn't able to serve the purpose. And that's because it wasn't able to capture the issues that were important to the people in the room. And these issues were very much mirrored in our public engagement work, which Nick will talk about next. And a lot of these issues centred on something we've heard about a lot in talks so far today. And that is about, rather than getting into the detail of comparing one geoengineering proposal to another against some definitive set of criteria, it's taking yourself back, stepping all the way back and saying, what are we talking about here? We're talking about climate change, the impacts that are likely to happen with climate change. Bound up with this then is how much mitigation is likely to take place, how much adaptation are we capable of doing. And it's important that any assessment takes those things into consideration. And so that's how we came up with our framework, which is composed of 3 sections. The first is called Storyline, and it asks 4 questions that tries to unpack the underlying drivers behind the assessment. Now, Steve mentioned this earlier in his talk. He mentioned that this idea of climate emergency was quite a driver, actually, in the Royal Society report. So that might be one of these storylines that underpins an assessment. Another storyline might be that an assessment is trying to identify a geoengineering proposal that could be used as part of a portfolio of measures in order to keep warming below 2 degrees C. Now, what's important is that these different storylines feed into the assessment and impact the outcome of an assessment. And that's why it's important to be very clear what the storyline is behind any assessment that's taking place. Also, it's important to be clear about the assumptions that have gone into this. Now, as we've heard from Hugh today and others, a lot of these ideas for geoengineering are at a very early stage. Okay, they're very poorly defined. There's a lot of unknowns in them. So we've got to be clear about what it is exactly that you are assessing. And also we've heard from Jim that it's very important to consider what kind of future are you assuming in your assessment? What are the assumptions about how much climate change will be happening? What are the assumptions about the pathway we are taking, the discussions we've had about business as usual? Is that 8.5 or is it RCP 4.5? And finally, we get to the criteria. And from our work with our stakeholder group and also from the public engagement work and the work of Rob Bellamy for his PhD, we can come up with much broader expanse of criteria beyond these kind of narrow technical focus criteria that cover society, economics and environment, the 3 pillars of sustainability. Now, what's important is when you do an assessment that is more open to different perspectives and has a broader base of criteria, you can change the results compared to other cases. So here is just some work that Dr. Rob Bellamy did as part of his PhD project. Here he's talked to 12 experts on mitigation, adaptation and geoengineering about options for tackling climate change. And each expert has given the options a pessimistic and an optimistic score, shown here by a bar. The blue options are mitigation options, the orange are carbon dioxide removal geoengineering, and the purple is stratospheric aerosols. And there's two messages to take from this. Firstly, to note the uncertainty with these performance scores given by the experts. And then secondly, to note that stratospheric aerosols performs poorly and that mitigation options are preferred over the geoengineering options. And this is a result we also see mirrored in our public engagement work. So just to draw your attention to the first of our 4 briefing notes where this content is discussed a little more, and to highlight our recommendation that geoengineering should be discussed and evaluated within the context of mitigation and adaptation measures. Okay, and with that I will hand you over to